Welcome to the Hub Roundtable for the 11th of April, 2025. I'm Rudyard Griffiths, publisher and co-founder, joined by Sean Speer, editor-at-large. Sean, great to be in conversation with you. Wow, you've had a whirlwind week. You were up here in Toronto in Hub HQ, off to Ottawa for the big conference of small C conservatives, and now safely ensconced in which borough in New York do you hail as the Speer household?
We're in Manhattan. We live in Harlem. Yeah, as you say, it's been a long week, a fun week though, really interesting one. It was great to be with you and the team in Toronto, and with hundreds of conservative activists and thinkers and etc. at the Canada Strong and Free Network conference, and then back in Toronto next week, Rudyard, including for our big debate party on Thursday night.
That's right. I think it's almost sold out, Sean, so I almost hate to do this because people might be disappointed, but they can reach out to us to editorial at the Hub. We've rented a movie theater in downtown Toronto. We've got popcorn and beer. Of course, you have to have those two things when you're watching a politics debate. And we're going to be convening the Hub community for a live stream of the leaders' debate and some comment and discussion afterwards. I'm looking forward to you being part of that. Sean, let's kick off as we do each and every week by acknowledging some of the great Hub heroes that have come on board to support our independent journalism, subsidy-free, during this campaign. One of the last outlets for truly independent news and analysis, and the Hub can only do this thanks to the support of our fellows.
Yeah, Rudyard, another great week of sign-ups, both as heroes and fellows. I want to specifically thank Brad S. and Andre E. For joining as lifetime fellows. As we talk about each week, Rudyard, that kind of support enables us to do the work that we do, including, of course, during this campaign, and importantly, not take the subsidies that, as you and I have been exchanging about over the past several days, have noticeably been absent from a lot of the commentary reporting about the media itself, which always seems to want to put itself front and center in the campaign.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, Sean, let's, on the first half of the show, just dig into where we are kind of at the official midway mark of this election. In the back half, let's do a little media criticism, because I think it's deserved. I think we're seeing some dynamics in the media that are really unhealthy. Partly it's got to do with the subsidies. I think partly it just has to do with, some lousy reporting that's going on that I think we should be calling out for our listeners and viewers. But let's start with where we're at in this campaign. You just came back from this big conference of small C conservatives in Ottawa. When you take that group, albeit, it's a segment, it's a slice, what is the mood like as we now kind of sprint towards a leaders' debate, the Easter long weekend, and then boom, election day?
Yeah, I'd say there were two main currents of thought that I heard. The first, something we talked about on the Daily Show today, is an increasing frustration, Roger, that conservatives have seemingly tried everything since 2015 now. 10 years later in 2025, putting forward different leaders who had different kind of theories of the case, as we often put it, including different messages, different policies, different positioning on the political spectrum. And yet the party looks to be stuck in something of a rut. There are different circumstances in each campaign, but the outcomes, if these polls prove accurate, are strikingly similar. The conservatives may be returned to Parliament, Rudyard, plus or minus 5 or 10 seats or whatever, which is really where they've been virtually since 2015. And so that, I think, is leading to increasingly tough questions about what is this inherent challenge that the party faces in pushing up its support beyond this ceiling it seems to have. The second, something we've talked a lot about, and no doubt we'll be talking about in the coming weeks, is the dynamic in Western Canada. Every time I talk to someone, Rudyard, from Alberta, they assure me that the situation is more fraught, more volatile than we understand in Central Canada. not for the purposes of a threat, so much as I think a real sense of alarm, that if the election goes the way these polls are indicating, we could have a really a high level of tension. And if of course the Carney government is over-indexed for Quebec, Roger, if he has a large constituency of Quebec MPs, you just wonder if we're kind of walking head into a pretty significant national unity crisis.
Yeah, I mean, look, all these things, the diagnostic is so important. I mean, you can absolutely point to this conservative campaign polling at the upper bound of what Stephen Harper's government polled at before it won a majority. I think it is a unique situation, and I think this last week has been especially kind of challenging for all the campaigns, Sean. I mean, we've had this incredible event last Wednesday at the Rose Garden announcing these tariffs. We then, had this near cataclysmic sell-off in the markets, a sudden reversal by the president, and now a resumption of kind of financial instability in the bond market and weakness in stock markets around the world, and an acceleration of what is shaping up to be a titanic trade war between China and the United States, slapping increasingly higher and higher levies on each other's imports. So I just think, Sean, this is such a bizarre time, to be having an election. There's so much going on. People are getting hit from so many directions. And I'll throw it back to you, but it goes to something we were talking about earlier in the week on our daily show, shameless plug, 10 a.m. Every Monday to Friday. Sean and I are on live with some great guests here at the Hub talking about what's going on in the election. But I just feel like, Sean, this was a risk-off week in each and every way. It was risk-off in terms of people looking at their portfolios, and we have record amounts of stock ownership now in Canada, the United States. But here, again, amongst all age cohorts, especially those boomers, which have been very elusive to the conservative campaign. And I think the mood in the country is one of like hunkering down, is one of like de-risking. And I'm like, Sean, we have to be sympathetic. We went through a pandemic, a once in a century pandemic. We then got smacked by inflation, and now, boom, we're into Trump 2.0 and a massive global trade war between, two gargantuan, economic and military peer competitors.
Yeah, yeah. I think, Roger, your risk on, risk off diagnosis is the most interesting way to think about the election I've heard from anyone. As you say, we've seen increasingly a flight to safety, and that's reflected both in the rise of support for the Liberal Party, but particular the favorability of Mark Carney himself. So I agree that there is something contingent and particular about this election campaign. But I think it is also worth acknowledging, Roger, since the Conservative Party of Canada was created in 2003, 2004, it has, as we've discussed previously, has had the highest floor of support of any of the major parties. It consistently polls, 27, 28%. I've never seen it lower than that. But it has a lower ceiling than the Liberals. At different times over the past couple of years, it pushed up to the highest we've seen it, but it settled back down to, I think, a more normal ceiling around 37, 38, 39, 40%. I think one way to think about this campaign, as I've said a couple of times over the past few weeks, is Pierre Poilievre consolidated to the right, Mark Carney has consolidated to the left. The problem is that there's more Carney supporters than there is of Poilievre. And I think this trend is secular. You get the sense that we are heading towards a world of two-party races in English Canada. And in that world, if the Conservatives want to compete for national power, they're going to have to figure out how to bust through that ceiling without the floor falling out, which is something we could talk about as well. It's a long way of saying, yes, there's something particular here, but it does reflect, I think, a broader challenge the party has faced for 20 years now.
Yeah, I mean, so much to talk about here, Sean, and we'll have to over the coming weeks because it is probably the big important conversation. I mean, you talk about busting, through the ceiling, but what's the cost of busting through the ceiling? Like, do you end up with any principles when you bust through the ceiling? Do you hew to anything other than the mushy middle? I mean, look at the Liberals. They have blown out the ceiling, and they've done it by basically flip-flopping on every single major policy plank and principle of the Trudeau government. We have David Coletto, the pollster from Abacus Data, on our Daily Show today, and he's showing that Mark Carney now on the carbon tax is leading Pierre Poilievre 2-1 amongst Canadians as to who cut the carbon tax. Now, it's right. Literally, he did cut it.
Yes.
But people are seeing falling gas prices. They're going to get these carbon rebate checks in a matter of weeks. I don't know, Sean. Like, sometimes the juice is not worth the squeeze. And it's all fine to talk about the Conservatives have to be more accessible. They have to reach more voters, assemble some big coalition. But I want to push you a little bit, my friend. Like, A to what end? And what do you have to compromise to get there? And do you have anything that resembles small c conservatism once you're on the other side of 51% in this country? And second, Sean, even if you can get there or conceive of some three-dimensional chess that leads you to that endpoint, what the heck happens to a party where Western Canadians are consistently seeing 3 leaders, possibly 4 if the Liberals win this election, being rejected by the rest of the country? You're going to say to those Conservatives in Western Canada, oh, trust us, guys, 5 times lucky, we got it this time. We're going to go to 50+1, and we're going to get everything that you want, all the pipelines that you need, all the provincial autonomy that you're due. Trust us. I just don't think that dog's going to hunt.
Yeah, a ton of insight, and you strike at the heart of, I think, the debate that will take place should the Conservatives lose this election. That is to say, if you accept my line of argument that there is this secular challenge of a ceiling that is too low, what must you do in order to raise that ceiling? And of course, a lot of people will instinctively push in the direction you just set out. You need to moderate. You need to move to the middle. You need to try to reach out to voters, particularly in the GTA, by trying to deal with the rougher edges of the Conservative Party. And the problem with that, of course, is that's sort of what Aaron O'Toole did. And the problem, and in that case, Rudyard, the floor fell out. The People's Party support went up to 5 points. So I'm not claiming that this will be easy. But I think that there are different paths to get there. As you know, I'm a big proponent of the political realignment, the gains that Conservatives are making with non-traditional working class and blue collar voters. I think that's definitely part of an effort to raise that ceiling. But I hope that's the conversation that Conservatives are having after this election campaign, because there's something, Rudyard, that feels unsatisfying about placing your political agency in the hands of the New Democrats, which is essentially what the Conservatives have done over the past several cycles. They can only, with a ceiling that is lower than the Liberals, they can only ultimately win if the New Democrats are high. I don't think you want to put your political fate in the hands of Jagmeet Singh or whoever replaces him as NDP leader.
Yeah. Look, my final point before we go to break and say goodbye to our complimentary listeners and viewers is just, there's some heavy machinery that's moving around right now in the final weeks of this campaign. And look, this election lots can still happen. A day is an eternity in politics, a week is 2. So we're not calling it, but I think all of us have to reflect on, there's real stakes here, real consequences. And, they're everything for what comes after the election, probably a brutal trade
Yes.
negotiation with the Americans, real weakness in the housing market. We're going to start taking a closer look at condos in Vancouver and Toronto in the hub next week, because there's some very worrying signs about the bottom falling out of that market. Real estate's our single biggest asset in this country. There's so much coming down the pipe, and I guess what worries me is a return to basically one-party government like we saw after a previous historic conservative defeat, the Mulroney, the final Mulroney government, and what happened afterwards. And we need competition. Good ideas come through being contested in the public square, in the political system, in our parliament. And if we are returning to some form of one-party rule in Canada, vis-a-vis a Carney majority government, it's not just bad for our politics, Sean, it's bad for having to deal with what is coming down the pipe, this poly crisis that is going to hit this country like a freight train come the summer.
Yeah, well said. And I think what you're alluding to is the potential for renewed fragmentation on the right. I don't think that's that's not necessarily an implausible outcome, particularly given the understandable agitation in parts of Western Canada. So these questions facing a Conservative Party after this election, should it lose, are fundamental, not just for the party, but as you say, for the country, for its politics, the extent to which a Carney-led government is held accountable. And it, as you say, there's going to be some pretty monumental decisions and responsibilities for the incoming government, not just managing the trade negotiation, a possible recession. You mentioned today something really important, the extraordinary appointment powers that the Prime Minister has. Just in the next 4 years, we're going to have ostensibly a new governor of the Bank of Canada. We're going to have at least one Supreme Court justice, and a panoply of other major appointments. And so elections matter, and accountability matters. And so, as you say, I think the next couple of weeks are going to be important to make a judgment about the next government, and possibly for the future of the Conservative Party itself.
Yeah, and I just hope a lot of people sitting on the fence just think, like, it's better. Competition is good. It's good in business. It's good in your life. It's good to have real competition and real competitors that push you, and we need that in our political system. So whatever the outcome is of this election, I'm hoping for competition, real viable competition between truly national parties that can reflect different visions of the country. Okay, Sean, let's say goodbye to our complimentary listeners and viewers. Take a quick break, and on the other side, join our Monk heroes and fellows, the donors to our community, and do a little media criticism, because I don't think it's been a great campaign for the media. We want to hand out some raspberries right after this short break.